Hello and welcome to Gavi Immer Gaming. This is Grant and I'm back with another Warhammer Battle Report. This is my first Age of Sigmar Battle Report. I've played a couple of games and I thought I'd put a battle report together for you guys. So we've got my Dark Elf army at the bottom of the screen versus a High Elf opponent. And for this game we didn't really put any restrictions at all. We brought a bunch of models and threw them on the table and stopped when we wanted to stop, just according to the rules, just to give it a try, see how things worked. So I'll just take you through the High Elf army first, and then we'll go through my army. So going from left to right at the top of the screen, we've got a unit of 3 eagles, and then followed by 2 bolt throwers on the hill. And then at the back of the High Elf compendium is the special rules for legions, and he's got that dragon host there, so he's got the 3 dragons in the middle. The first dragon, the blue dragon, is a dragon mage, and the other 2 are princes on dragons. And then following on, he's got a flame phoenix, a frost phoenix, a nether prince on a griffin, and then another frost phoenix. And then just in front of the house there, he's got a 3rd bolt thrower, and then on the far right hand side of the screen he's got 2 of the skycutter chariots. So he's got a total of 15 models, and he said he just brought as many flyers as he had just to see how it worked, and I guess we'll see. So here's just a shot of the left hand side of the board from my point of view, his right flank, and then here's a close-up of his left flank. And then just going through my army from left to right, I've got a Cold One chariot, and then behind them is a unit of 5 warlocks. Just behind that tower is Malekith, and then to the right of the tower I've got 5 dark riders and 5 more warlocks. Behind those 2 units is a unit of 30 witches, and beside that is the cauldron. On top of that rock is a bolt thrower, and just to the right of the rock is Morathi, and then a second chariot, Cold One chariot. Then we've got the forest, and then beside the forest is a Hydra. Just behind them is a unit of 20 executioners. And lastly, just right there by those ruins, is another bolt thrower. So obviously I greatly outnumber him as far as number of models is concerned, so he got to choose the sudden death category that he wanted to go with. He could have chosen the option to have one of his models or one of his units within 3 inches of a terrain piece in my territory at the end of turn 4, but looking at the board, there was no way I was going to be able to kill all those flyers by the end of turn 4. He would just fly one of them in and win the game. So he actually chose a different one. Forget what it's called right now, but it's where I got to choose a unit of at least 5 models, and I had to make sure that they survived, and his objective was to wipe them out. We had a 2-hour time limit or so, so we don't quite get the full game finished, but still interesting. We'll see how it goes. Incidentally, I chose those witches, the 30 witches at the back, far top left-hand side of the table, as the unit that he would have to destroy. So here's just a close-up of my right flank, and a close-up of my left flank. And because I had more units than he did, he ended up finishing his deployment first, so he automatically got the first turn. All of the damage spells that he had were out of range, so he tried to cast the Mystic Shield, and it failed to go off. In shooting from the 2 bolt throwers, he did 5 wounds that you can see there on my Hydra. And then as far as movement, he moved the eagles up a little bit on the far right hand side of, from his point of view, his right flank, my left hand side, and the dragons moved up a little bit as well. And then on the right hand side of the table, again, everything just moved up slightly. He wanted to stay out of the 18-inch range of my magic as well, so he just stayed back a little bit. There were no charges, so we move into Dark Elf turn 1. Magic and shooting, I did a couple of wounds on his eagle that you can see there, and I think that is about it. I did get the Mystic Shield off on the Witch Elves to try to keep them protected as much as possible. And at the end of my hero phase, my Hydra healed the 3 wounds. I moved up to try to hold off the dragons as much as possible from getting in at my witches, because again, ultimately that's the ultimate goal, is to try to protect them as much as possible. Morathi moved up to be in the 18-inch range for casting and dispelling in future turns. And here on the right hand side, I moved my witches into that tower and the cauldron back behind the tower to try to protect it, because it's giving the 5-up essentially a ward save, 5-up ward save to those witches, and then moved up the cavalry and Malekith just to provide a little bit of a roadblock for those flyers that are going to be coming after the witches. I already mentioned the shooting, so we move right into the charge phase, and my chariot charged into this first sky cutter and actually did an impact hit. On a 6 it does 1 mortal wound. I happen to roll a 6, which is great. But unfortunately this chariot failed its charge in on that red dragon, and the Hydra failed its charge on the eagles. In the combat phase, my chariot was able to do 3 more wounds on the sky cutter and only took 1 wound in return. And then this is still a mechanic of the game I'm trying to get used to. Because that second sky cutter was nearby, he was able to pile in with that. Even though I didn't charge into that unit, it was close enough that within the 3 inches that he was able to pile in. And so he piled in, but completely whiffed his attacks. My chariot was able to make all the saves for any wounds that were applied. So that's the end of turn 1. Turn 2, we roll off to see who gets the first play in that turn, and I happen to win the roll, so I get to go ahead. In the hero phase, I did a few wounds through some magic on that blue dragon mage, and also fully healed my Hydra. And then in movement, moved my Hydra and the executioners, and also that chariot up to be able to charge into his dragon host. I was going to move the Hydra over to deal with the eagles, but I thought that the dragons were a much more dangerous foe to have to deal with. And on my right hand side of the table, really no movement at all. Everything is in place to try to protect the witches as long as possible. And so here's just a view of the full board after my movement in turn 2. In shooting, I was able to do a couple more wounds on that blue dragon. So then it's right into the charge phase. I charge the Hydra at that blue dragon mage. I charge my executioners at the red dragon, and also the chariot at the red dragon. You can see this is after I've piled in on that red dragon with my executioners. And in the combat phase, these executioners, if you haven't played with or against these executioners, then wow, they certainly can put out a wallop. I was able to completely destroy the red dragon. What happens is they have 2 attacks each, and they with every 6 they roll on the to hit roll, it does automatically 2 mortal wounds. So I think I rolled 7 or 8 6s out of all the attacks and killed the red dragon. He then attacked with that white dragon at the top of the table onto the chariot and was able to do a couple of wounds, and then my Hydra attacked and finished off his blue dragon mage. And with his mage dead and a second dragon dead, he was really kind of disappointed. He didn't even get to use the special fire attack from the 3 dragon host. He thought he was for sure didn't have a chance to win this game. I was feeling pretty good. I thought that killing those 2 dragons this early on was obviously a great thing, and I was certainly ahead at this point, so we will continue to see how things go. And in the remainder of the combat phase, the Sky Cutters managed to put up to 6 wounds on this Cold One chariot. I had misread the War Scroll for this. I thought it had 8 wounds, but it only has 6, so this should have killed it. It stuck there and messed things up a little bit for the remainder of the game, but we did try to correct it as best we could, which you will see later on. So after Dark Elf turn 2, which again is the top of turn 2, I am feeling pretty good. I've killed 2 dragons, and my witches haven't even nothing's even close to them. So I'm feeling pretty good about this. He's got no magic, which means that with my warlocks and Malekith and Morathi, I've got free reign on the magic. He can't stop me. 30 witches that he's going to have to try to destroy in order to get a major victory. Things are looking good. I'm quite happy about this. So it's on to High Elf turn 2, and he moves those 2 flyers up to face off against my Warlocks and my Dark Riders. The other 2 go over to try to deal with the Executioners and the Hydra. Here's a close-up of the left-hand side. He moved his eagles up a little bit as well to go make that charge on the bolt thrower a little bit easier. And you can see one executioner has died from shooting. In other shooting, he took 2 of the warlocks out and also did 1 more wound on the 3rd one. And I think the shooting from the dragon killed this chariot. After movement, he charged his eagles into the bolt thrower. And you can also see there's 3 wounds on Marathi. I think that was from shooting as well. And kabam, here they come. So he's got his Frost Phoenix and his Flame Phoenix both into my executioners, and that White Dragon as well. The Frost Phoenix, by the way, has Caradrian on top, so he's going to put out some punch as well. And that second executioner is dead from a bow shot, I think. I think we forgot to shoot one guy and went back and corrected that. And this is after close combat, but you can see both the Prince on the Griffin and that Frost Phoenix went into the last 3 warlocks, destroyed them in close combat. And you can also see where we corrected the Sky Cutter, so that chariot is gone. We moved the Sky Cutters up. They shot, killed off one of the warlocks, and then charged in as well. And then in that close combat, the warlocks were able to finish off the 1 Sky Cutter that was wounded from the previous combat with the Cold One chariot. And in combat here, the eagles, because they charged, I think they get 6 attacks each on that bolt thrower, and only managed 1 wound to get through. He rolled pretty badly, but the story of this game actually was the saves. The saves were crazy. This bolt thrower, even though it's not technically on the ruins there, we were playing it as though it was. So it has a 5-up save, went to a 4-up, and he just couldn't get through it. But wow, the executioners got absolutely slaughtered. Before they died, they were able to put a couple of wounds on that White Dragon, but by the time they got to attack, actually, their numbers had been dwindled down a fair bit. There was 1 left after the turn, and of course he died or fled in the battle shock phase. So wow, so much for the ability for them to put out a punch. They fall like flies, certainly with battle shock. Malekith was too far away for me to use his command ability, which is all exile units within 20 inches don't have to take battle shock tests. So that was great to protect the stuff around him, but these guys were just too far away. And so we roll off for turn 3, and the High Elves got to go first this time. So no real magic because he's got no mage. His command ability just allows re-rolling of 1s to wound, I believe. So nothing really going on in that phase. In the movement phase, he flew his Phoenix over top of my Hydra, which does some, I think, D3 mortal wounds or 3 mortal wounds. I forget exactly what it does. And then in shooting, he was also able to do a couple of additional wounds. And then on this side, nothing in the shooting phase or anything, but in the movement phase, he moved over his 2 flyers in front of the Dark Riders. And here's where you can see the Flame Phoenix after flying over top of the Hydra and the shooting. The Hydra's taken 7 wounds. And then both Phoenixes and the Dragon charge into the Hydra. And the double charge in onto the Warlocks from the Frost Phoenix and the Prince on the Griffin. And of course the Hydra is gone. But the Bolt Thrower is not. Only took 2 more, actually took 3 more wounds. I applied 2 to the War Machine itself and 1 to the crew. So there's 1 crew left and 1 wound left on the War Machine. And a couple of dead Warlocks. Maybe 1, I think, from shooting, and maybe 1 from the combat. So we move on to Dark Elf turn 3. The command phase, just a little bit of magic and nothing too important. Just keeping that Mystic Shield up on the witches as much as possible. Move Malekith over to the side here. And I shot my Bolt Thrower into the eagles that are right in front of it and was able to kill 1. And here's a view of the table after my movement phase. Charged my Malekith into the Prince on the Griffin, and he completely whiffed. Actually, he didn't whiff. That's not fair to say. But the saves, again, were crazy in this game, and that Prince made most, if not all, of his saves. So it's on to turn 4, and the High Elves get roll to play first in this turn. No magic, of course, but in shooting, he was able to kill this bolt thrower with one of his bolt throwers. I think he was getting sick and tired of this bolt thrower still being alive, so he goes for overkill and charges this Phoenix in as well. Oh, and I should say as well, part of the reason that I think he did this is we're running out of time. This is probably going to be the last turn, so there was no way that that Phoenix could get over in time to help with the other side of the table, so he figured he would use it here. He had flown his Frost Phoenix over to be just 3 inches away from Malekith, and then charged him in as well. But really, in the combat phase, again, through some bad rolling to hit and wound, and then some good rolling for the saves, really nothing happened here. But on the left side of the table, eventually the Eagles and the Phoenix were able to finish off the bolt thrower. I must say I cried a little bit when this bolt thrower went down. He was certainly a hero standing up as long as he did to these Eagles. But on the right-hand side of the table, at least one Warlock is still alive. So at this point, it's the very last turn of the game. I cast Soul Stealer from Malekith and did a couple of wounds on, maybe I guess just one wound on the Prince on the Griffin, and that allowed Malekith to recover a wound. Brought the witches out of the building just to get them in the game, and subsequently charged that into the Griffin as well. And the Griffin actually only had one more wound at this point, so the witches went first and finished him off. And here's just a view of the right-hand side of the table. You can see his Phoenix did another 4 wounds on Malekith, but not enough to kill him. And here's a view of the left-hand side of the board. You can see his dragon, forgot to mention it, I think in the top of turn 4, he flew him back to the back corner of the board, so he would be out of the range of any of my magic or bolt throwers. I think he had only 1 wound left at this point. So of course he fled like the chicken high elf pointy ear that he is. And that's the end of the game. It was a lot of fun. In the end, although he didn't manage to kill off the Witch Elves, he was able to get a minor victory for destroying a larger percentage of the models on my side than I was able to kill on his. Overall, like I said, a great game. It was back and forth. I thought for sure that I had was really in charge when I killed off those 2 dragons early on in the game. But now that I look at it and I see sort of all of the monsters that he still has remaining, I think he may have been able to dwindle down those witches before I would be able to kill them all off. He's got that dragon. Yeah, it's only got 1 or 2 wounds left, but he's got the dragon back in the corner. He's got a couple of phoenixes, 3 phoenixes left, 2 frost phoenixes and 1 fire phoenix. He's got that sky cutter. He's got some good things. Those eagles still, bolt throwers still that he can plow into these witches that I think would probably dwindle them down. I just took 3 things out of this game, and just some of my final thoughts on this game, and also just sort of Age of Sigmar as a whole. First of all, I think that sudden death is slightly overpowered. Like I said at the beginning, he could have chosen very easily to end this game at the end of turn 4 and just had one of his flyers fly into near one of the terrain pieces that were on my side of the table. You can see he's still got multiple flyers available to be able to do that. This is at the end of turn 4, so he certainly could have taken care of that without much problem. And just some, like I said, some general thoughts. I think, unfortunately, I do like Age of Sigmar. I think there's a lot of good things in it, but I think the rules as they're written right now really favor this type of high elf army. Lots of single model monsters, high wounds, high output as far as damage, and just generally really tough to kill. That's, I think, definitely in favor over large blocks like my witches, like my executioners, just because so much of the balance comes into number of models. And I don't think we're talking about anything new here, stuff that most of you guys already know, but when I've got a block of 30 witches and he's got 15 models on the table, it automatically gives him that sudden death advantage. But just beyond sudden death as well, I think the even just how you calculate the percentage of models to determine a victory one way or the other. I think I put out a ton of punch. I killed a lot of things. I put a lot of wounds on a lot of guys, but because I wasn't able to finish off those single models, I really only killed 5 of his 15 models, and he certainly got more than a third of mine. So really, tough to deal with this type of arm. The last benefit that I see with these single model monster type of models is the battle shock test. They're pretty much immune to that battle shock phase, where blocks of infantry can certainly get wiped out through that mechanic of the game. And I think that's really kind of a shame. Part of the pageantry of Warhammer Fantasy was having these big blocks of infantry or cav, and then sprinkle in a couple of single model monsters to round out the army. And I think you lose that a little bit with this Age of Sigmar style of play. So it's a fun game. I really like it. I'd just like to see some sort of mechanic to try to balance that a little bit. So there will be more Age of Sigmar battle reports to come in the coming weeks and months. I think the next time we play, I will try some type of comp system, whether it's number of wounds or whether it's some of the comp systems that are flying around on the interwebs. So look forward to that. I hope you guys enjoyed this, and watch in the future. Thanks so much.